Hello everybody and welcome to Performance on Wheels. My name is Austin and this is my dad Todd. This is the 2020 Honda Civic Type-R.
A 306 turbocharged four-cylinder.
The Civic Type-R was brought here to the US in 2017, and since then a lot of reviewers have it be supposedly the staple of the best front-wheel drive vehicle ever produced. With the entirely reworked front end of the Civic Type-R, it was designed to have practically zero torque steer, and today we're going to dive deep into the Civic Type-R and find out why these things are still selling over MSRP with 40,000+ miles on them, and they're approaching 5 years old.
Yeah, the Type-R isn't new in 2017. There's obviously a history of Type-Rs, but this is the car that you can actually live with. In setting the front-wheel drive world record time at the Nürburgring, obviously there's proof in the pudding that this is a serious performance car.
Take me back to a place where I felt at home. Take me back to a day when we weren't alone. Take me back to an age when the world felt small, way back before we blew it all. Take me back to a place where I felt at home. Take me back to a day when we weren't alone. Take me back to an age when the world felt small, way back before we blew it all.
Before we start today's video, we need to give a quick shout out to Apple Valley Ford in Lincoln for supplying the Civic Type-R used in today's video. If you guys are interested in this Civic Type-R, it is currently listed for sale for $42,999 here in Apple Valley, Minnesota. Apple Valley Ford is one of the largest Ford dealerships in the Midwest and a very high rated dealer. So if you guys are interested, please be sure to check out the link in the description below. Now let's get into the video.
We realize in 2023 the Civic Type-R has matured, but it's still fun to look at a car that you can actually go to a used car lot and buy. Yes, it's expensive. Congratulations if you purchased one new and you're still holding on to it. That was a pretty wise investment, I would say.
Yeah.
But, so this thing came out in 2017, set records, was a lot of fun. It still had some flaws though. So it was noted that guys that were taking this to the track and driving them pretty hard, the car would overheat, and there was also some transmission issues. The whole intent was to make this car stick to the ground like Velcro, more so than any other Type-R across the world that was released. But they also wanted this car to be a driver's car that you could drive and not have this crazy harsh ride. So they got rid of the torsion rear end that you'd find in some other Civics, and they put in a multi-link, even throwing a trailing arm, so you not only had the longitudinal suspension travel, but also the latitudinal suspension travel. And then up front, they did this fun design where instead of like an A-arm concept, it's more of an L concept. In 2020, it's my opinion that this is the one to buy. The previous ones, yeah, they're still cool, great cars, but you see in 2020, this is when they made some pretty radical transformations to try to address even some of the small imperfections. Things like trying to address that overheating by adding 13% more airflow into that front end. This really didn't solve the issue altogether. However, it was their attempt to try to address it. People that were driving the cars hard after 2020 were still experiencing some of that same overheating, but they also did things like upgrading some of the bushings and adjusting the spring rate and the active dampeners in the suspension, all to just really dial this car into perfection.
Up front, when we look at the Civic Type-R, we're just going to go over the design now that we're approaching 5 years old here. Just in the entire front end, I've always really liked the way they look, and a quick way that you can tell that it's a 2020 is this little design right here. Fun fact, this hole is actually, so the horn is a little bit louder. If you notice, that hole is not there on the driver's side. One thing that I do not really fully understand is supposedly they reworked the grille so there's 13% more cooling, but I don't see any difference between the other model years. I do want to point out one more thing on the front end before we move a little bit further back. Obviously there's a lot of function up front, but we still do have those huge fake vents or fake covers over the front, other than that little slit for the horn that I was talking about. One difference, another difference you can tell about the 2020 is if you actually look at the brakes, the 2020's got two-piece rotors. First year that they bumped it up to a two-piece rotor away from the solid one-piece rotor that was on the previous models.
And that's just in the front.
And that's just up front, yep. And then we obviously have that huge functional hood scoop. We have those huge functional side vents, and we have the aggressive side skirts, and we do just have some pretty wide hips up front.
Right.
And pretty wide hips on back. The ones on back just kind of look like they're tacked on a little bit, but I still think they look really cool.
Yeah, so ultimately the Type-R is 3 inches wider over a normal Civic, so about 1.5 inches that you see those hips protrude over those tires versus a normal Civic. But then when you come back here, there is a lot of form and function, but also a little bit of that fast and furious that makes this car intriguing. So you got the roof diffusers that obviously carry that
vortex generators.
Right, vortex generators. Those carry the air back to what some will call the obnoxious spoiler. Some will absolutely love it. It is important to note that this spoiler is fairly well hidden when you're sitting in that driver's seat and looking out the rear view. But let's talk about the functionality of the spoiler. Let's just use a random speed of 125 miles per hour. That's going to put about 70 pounds of downforce on the rear end of the Type-R, which obviously this thing is all about handling. What's impressive is this car can go all the way up to 169 miles per hour.
As we move our way onto the back end of the Type-R, obviously this is where a lot of people hate this thing. I actually have never disliked it. I've always thought it looked pretty good. I even like the new one that's out now. There's a few things that I'm going to point out that I don't like, that I think look really cheap, but the overall design of it, I mean, it really catches your eye. I think it looks good. I've always enjoyed it. I thought that it looks better than the STI, mainly just because the STI has been the same for so dang long, and this just looks unique. And
this makes it clear it's an enthusiast car, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely, because obviously we get the tri-exhaust down here, which is functional. It does have function, and that is actually the reason that this produces more power than the previous gen Civic Type-R, which we didn't get here in the United States, but ultimately that is the reason for the horsepower increase. And the way that functions, do you want to go ahead and explain that?
No, have at it.
Oh, so ultimately the way that it works is there is the single exhaust here, which reduces drone while driving. This vehicle does still have some drone, but the whole purpose is to reduce drone and increase back pressure when you're getting after it. So there is purpose to that single middle exhaust. It's not just looks, and there is 3 big old mufflers back there.
Yeah, what I was going to highlight is obviously the designers were consistent with the false vents on the back that has the same hockey stick swoop that matches that front end. So at least it's nice to see that they were thinking about that design, but that's another example of some of the design elements that do not have function. We do have obviously a lot more of the airflow to get this thing held down on the bottom. Looking underneath it, it's kind of surprising to see that it's not covered more.
Some of the things I don't like about the body of the Civic Type-R is all of this carbon fiber over that whole thing. I think it looks terrible. I'm not gonna lie. I think it looks super fake.
It looks aftermarket.
It looks aftermarket. It does not. I don't like it. It just looks cheap, to be honest with you.
It does.
And then it goes from that weird carbon fiber to just flat plastic, like here on the side vents and those front vents and the vents on the back. I just think it all should have been just gloss black to match the wing. Yeah, it just looks cheap.
There's definitely, those are some of the complaints of the $40,000 driver enthusiast car, and that doesn't, that's not only true on the outside of the car. A lot of those complaints can be carried to the inside, that the inside is just an afterthought or just really a normal Civic with some very minor touches. And that's where some people have some issues with this when you're spending $40,000 on
the infotainment system is terrible.
Very laggy.
It's just super laggy. It's old school. You have to go through the infotainment system to like use the climate controller or whatever. It's just so annoying. It's just not well designed.
Right, and one thing Austin brought up earlier is that S2000, and it's important to note that in 2020, that's when you can actually get that shifter that mimics the Type-R of old, of the golden era, the really popular design there on the shifter that became available in 2020, as well as that reworked steering wheel, which is nice. That actually adds some ambiance to the car, adds some character to the car. It lets you know that there's something special, and that's also true to the front seats that are really supportive. They make you feel like you're in something special, but that can't be said for the back seats. You have these striking red seats up front, and then you have essentially just a normal Civic seat in the back that has no color, no character, nothing special about it. So that's one thing that always stood out to me.
Let's go ahead and hop on the interior of the Civic Type-R, and then let's go for a drive and wrap up the video.
So I'm 6 feet tall and I did have to push the seat up, but the rear seats are actually comfy. So you can obviously see that you have cup holders, which is different than your just base Civic. And obviously there's some red stitching to try to highlight that red in the front seats. And the other thing to note in their attempt to make it feel special back here is that red seat belt. But ultimately the rear seat is, it's just kind of boring, again, for that $40,000 car. Imagine how cool it would be if these were red back here as well. But comfort-wise, we're talking a normal Civic. We do have the hatchback, so that adds to it. That's the only way you can get the Type-R. That's how the car has the best handling. Let's not forget there's some additional glue on this thing when they press this thing together. That's, again, all about handling. That's what makes this thing fun to drive.
When we talk about space and practicality in the Civic, well, there you go. You can fit almost 4 tires fully flat inside of the Civic. We're about 4 inches short from 4 tires laying flat with the seats folded down. There is lots of room in the back of this thing, even with the seats folded up. This is a very, very practical daily driver for that reasons. And a lot of high performance hatches in this segment. There is either bars or the seats don't fold down to help with rigidity. But here in the Civic Type-R, they managed to make it very practical with all sorts of room. How do things feel on the inside of the old Type-R over here?
Hey, thanks, I'm glad you asked. How does the red seatbelt look on me is the most important question. I'm actually really impressed with the creativity of design and functionality in here, whether it's the center console we're talking about that has the adjustable cup holders and additional storage underneath. You know, it's pretty awesome that you even have room up here and room under here for your pass-through in front of the console, along with some storage in the doors and a good-sized glove box. It's a practical, fun car that you can daily drive, so I do appreciate that.
I'm currently driving the Civic Type-R in Plus R mode, and the amount that the steering changes between the drive modes and the suspension changes is quite impressive. In Plus R mode, it dramatically changes the weight of the steering, as well as the overall turning radius of the car with the amount that you turn the wheel. It really tightens things up quite a bit, and it feels really good. Accompany that with the shifter. It has a very short throws to it, very solid feel. However, there's a bit of play when you are in gear. And then not only that, but the clutch feels really good in the Civic Type-R as well. And then if you combine all of that with the incredibly comfortable and highly bolstered seats and the very low sitting position, it makes the Civic Type-R a really awesome place to be on a track day. Now let's let this turbo spool up real quick. Ready? It's definitely a really fun car, and it puts you into the back of your seat. You guys take a listen here. Rev matching downshifts. It makes downshifting incredibly easy. You don't have to heel toe all the time, but however, it's something that I kind of enjoy doing, so it takes the fun out of that, but you can disable it, of course.
Yeah, so we're talking a low 13-second quarter-mile time in the Type-R, as well as right about a 5-second 0 to 60 if you hammer everything right. I actually have a coworker and a friend who's got a Type-R. He loves it. He's done a few modifications to it, kind of wants to bring it up to about a 500 wheel horsepower car, so there is that capability with add-ons. But he says the car's a dog out of the hole. It's really fun when you get this thing moving, and I can appreciate that comment now spending some time in the Type-R, feeling that 23 pounds of boost from the factory spool up and let loose. It really is hard not to put a smile on your face.
It is definitely impressive how the Civic Type-R is much quicker, obviously once it's in the rev range, and it just keeps on pulling, which I really do appreciate about it. I do really enjoy just being behind the wheel of this thing, and it is incredible, even in Plus R mode, how comfortable this car is. I mean, the handling is unbelievable, but it's not over dampened like so many other hot hatches are. It's just such a comfortable ride that, I mean, it's just the ultimate front wheel drive daily driver. What is most impressive about the Civic Type-R as we push it into a corner is how much grip it does have for a front-wheel drive vehicle. It is incredibly impressive what this thing can do in corners. Not only that, but I can floor it right now in a 300 horsepower front-wheel drive car, and my steering wheel doesn't go jerking anywhere. It really is incredible, the engineering that they put into this thing to make it ultimately the best front-wheel drive car with throwing power at it. This thing has 300 horsepower. It's impressive. Here's an example right here, okay? We're in second gear going 20 miles an hour. In your average car, this wheel's gonna jerk to the left or right. Floor it. Look at how straight.
I hope no one is getting a negative vibe from this video, because ultimately you have to appreciate the Civic Type-R. In a day where enthusiast cars are fading one by one, it's awesome that this is a car that can still be appreciated, going after the whole JDM scene. But it's not only that. If you like driving a car, if you like going through gears, if you like steering feel, like, it almost doesn't get better than this, especially at the price point that the Type-R is at.
Yeah, and that is where I really do appreciate the Type-R. I love the way that it looks. I think it looks awesome. I think the interior is fun. I think it's ultimately a really good time to drive. But me personally, me in the car market, I couldn't personally look at that $43,000 price point and be like, this is the car that I'm going to pick. I do really, really like it, but personally, this just isn't the one for me. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's video here on Performance on Wheels. I really hope you guys did enjoy. And if you guys want to see some other content, be sure to check out our channel. We have all types of different car videos. We're currently in the middle of building a go-kart out of a C4 Corvette. We just got done building a carbon wide body C5 Z06 and driving it across the country, tuning an Audi A8 that makes what, like 500 something horsepower now,
yeah, we'll
in
see
this
if we're done
big
with
old
that
luxury sedan. So we have all types of cool videos, Defender, lots of Maverick stuff. Whatever you guys are looking for, be sure to check out our channel. We look forward to seeing you guys in the future. Have a great rest of your day.